Gaming Tankers, we are back with another video featuring World of Tanks Mod Armor, and this being a Wargaming product means we have to have the Wargaming prayer. Dear Tank Jeebus, grant me the strength to accept things I cannot change, for Wargaming maketh the rules, and Wargaming breaketh the rules. And today, we're not necessarily just featuring the Object 492 Belka, but something about it kind of had me going, wait a minute, there's something familiar about this. So let's begin. Designers working at the Kharkiv-Morisov Design Bureau, KMDB, during the 1980s developed several similar and competing proposals at the same time, including variants of the tank designated the Object 490. One proposal called for the 125mm smoothbore boom snout selected for the Object 490 be replaced with a 152mm gun boom snout, seen as a better counter to NATO's armament. Although models and prototypes of the Object 490 and its variants were built, none entered production before the Soviet Union collapsed. Now, something about that might have triggered a little like, wait a minute, this sounds familiar. Anyone? Anyone? It's not the 152mm. No, it's not. You know, something about this sounded eerily familiar, like from a tank we just had. In fact, let's see. Something familiar. What was that? Kharkiv-Morisov Design Bureau has been mentioned before? Correct. In fact, let's take a look at some of the tanks that's been mentioned in. Well, here's the Object 490 Topol. Hey, Object 490. Tasked with the goal of creating armored vehicles that could counter NATO's technological advancement, engineers at the Kharkiv-Morisov Design Bureau, KMDB, in the 90s. Here we go again. But what other tanks have KMDB? And here, the Dragula 250i AGM. The 250i AGM is upgraded design offered by the Ukraine's Morisov Design KMDB. Whoa. Whoa. Red flag just went up. I mentioned a nation that is not. And now we have the Object 477A Malog, the first OP tank in Era 3, what some would say, after the Weissel up. And we read Kharkiv-Morisov Design Bureau and Ukrainian state-owned. It's almost like there's been a slow build to the Ukrainian tank line. Interesting. Why is that interesting to me? Why am I bringing this up? Well, that's because I'm wondering, I'm speculation. We're getting into theoretical speculation, all this jazz, that I think that not too long ago, maybe a few years ago or so, there may have been plans to bring in the, what we'll call, for the sake of not, upsetting anyone, we'll call it the Kharkiv-Morisov Design Bureau line, or KMDB, not KMFDM. That's a band. The KMDB line, and real-world politics kind of made that region a bit of a sensitive topic. So that got pushed aside. And instead, we got the T-80 line, which in the real world, rules had to be bent. I'll get to why, in my mind, WarGaming Chicago did this. It was, we had the IS tanks lead into the T-80 tanks when that line came out, as opposed to the T-64s, which then became upgraded T-80s in the real world. But that, I think WarGaming, you know what? We can get two tank lines out of this. We have IS tanks, which we do need more heavy tanks in Air 1, and the IS tanks fit perfectly. The T-80s, we can make faster than T-72s, just worse to shoot than T-72s. But, yeah, we can also have an offshoot, because the Soviet Union had a lot of satellite nations, let's be honest, and we can have the KMDB factory be used to have the T-64s lead into the T-84s, which were upgraded T-80s, which were upgraded T-64s. and we have a few more modern tanks. Again, I know this is getting wish-washy, and we're on thin ice in so many ways, but it's a lot of speculation, and that fact that the reason I say this, like, they had these assets, they wanted to go with them, things went sideways, and then like, well, they really do want these things because Era 3 has 5 tanks from this one design bureau. That's pretty impressive. The fact that in the past, like, 3 years, they've been just very steadily drip feeding this design bureau's tanks into the game. And I think they're excited for this tank line. Kind of makes me excited for this tank line. And I don't know, what do you think? Comment down below. Should we have had the T-64s already, which we probably should have, or am I on a track, or am I just talking nonsense here? Do you think that maybe if things can kind of, I mean, we're not going to get this year. They've only said we already have our 2 Cold War lines. This is 2025, by the way. We have our 2 Cold War tank lines. We're gearing up for the 2 World War II tank lines. So next year, could we have things? Well, they're not overly hot. They're far away from being cold either. So, yeah. Do you think WarGaming should kind of keep appeasing political elements and not make a direct reference to the place where KMDB is located, or should they just be filled with American bravado and be like, our game, our rules, we do it our way? Which, on occasion, that crew in Chicago has really done it their way. But then again, you know, begging for forgiveness from your parents is a lot easier than, say, begging for forgiveness for someone with political power and authority over certain assets of your means of making money. You know. I'm curious what you think. Like and subscribe also if you appreciate a slightly different view of this game. I know I could be like all the others and just start regurgitating stats and give you a, hey, here's how to play, or here are my 5 tips. But then again, sometimes let's have a different perspective on the game. If you appreciate that, like and subscribe. I personally am it's always fun to be like, oh, what's the drama behind the scenes, or why did they do this? Can we figure out why they've brought in 5 premium tanks from the same design bureau, yet we don't really have any of the tech tree line? That's not really how they do things. It's usually like, well, you get 1 or 2 of a nation's tank line, or premium tanks of that nation before the tank line comes in, kind of like a little wet your whistle, or like give you a little, ooh, the future has something special for you. Here we have 5 tanks. Like, seriously, that's a decent chunk, especially for Cold War, which has an expanding tank line, but also still doesn't have a lot of tanks just yet. We're getting up there, but it's like, yeah. And as you learn more about the world of, real world tanks, KMDB and that nation have been very impactful in the progress of modern tanks and keeping tanks in a very powerful state, and being, you know, they've exported many tanks to around the world. So it's kind of like after, you know, the USSR, after the actual Soviet Union, you know, the USSR, that country, this was the next Soviet or Warsaw Pact nation that was really important to tank design. So, and I think that is something that crew in Chicago is really keyed on bringing in, because it's like, yeah, KMDB really helped improve and pioneer certain tank designs, and just that whole, especially with like the Mullo and the Object 490B here. It's like, yeah, there was a lot of experimentation for the practical and impractical, so they might be really itching to be like, let's have some really unique tanks that could be really fun, or possibly game breaking in the game. Anyway, that's my thoughts on this. By all means, chime in down below. And don't worry, if you just want explanations on how to play tanks or, you know, just a rundown of tank stats. Well, it was nice for you to visit, and I'll see you in the comments of other content creators' videos. With that said, I hope you keep your tracks on the ground and RNGs in your favor, and hope to catch you in the next one. Thank you and goodbye.